We're touching on things that I care very deeply about, but this isn't about me. We're talking about Holly.
Totally about you.
Welcome to the Up and Coming Artist Podcast. I'm Ben, an animator.
And I'm Christian, a 35mm film photographer.
Whoa, Christian, why are you using such a specific title for yourself?
Maybe because I want to promote myself. Check me out, guys. Christian James on Instagram. It's pretty great.
Well, contrary to common belief, and seriously, Christian, I've had people ask me this, is this an animation-only podcast?
No.
Exactly. In case our talk with Tien and Mike Alvarez doing glass blowing and music didn't prove it to you, today we have on a photographer.
That's right. A good friend of ours, Holly Sigafoos.
Hi, guys.
Hey,
Hi.
welcome to the podcast.
I like the shameless plugs.
That's right.
It's good stuff.
Yeah.
We're all about cheesy transitions and shameless plugs.
Oh, good. I'll fit right in.
Yeah.
That's good.
So, my little, very short description of you from Instagram alone is like wedding, engagement, and doggy photographer. But can you expand on that? Because you do a lot of stuff.
I do a lot of stuff, and I'm pretty sad that you're finding all your information about me on Instagram. That's great.
Just pretend that that's who you really are.
That is who I really am.
I am my Instagram brand.
So true. So true. So I am a wedding and lifestyle photographer, but I do have a big love for dogs, probably more than most people, so I do photograph them often. But usually families, portraits, weddings. I do a little bit of everything, but I specialize in weddings.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's cool. And like, when did that get started for you?
Professionally, or just when did I pick up a camera and fall in love with it?
Yeah, let's go all the way back.
Okay, well, I'll try to keep it short, but I grew up in a family of artists. So my dad he builds houses, he does all sorts of things with his hands. My mom crafts, she's really good at it. And my sister's always been like an artist where she paints and draws. So everyone in my family kind of has their own like little area of expertise. And there came me. I couldn't do any of it. I can build things somewhat, but I got bored fast. My mom tried to teach me to knit and like sew and crochet. It was never straight. And my sister was super gracious, and she tried to teach me to draw and paint. I could do it a little bit, but I'd get mad because hers were better. So I'm just like, I'm done.
Rivalry, yeah.
I'm done. Yeah, I couldn't, even video games, even that's kind of an art form in some areas too. I couldn't do those either. I would just get so over it. And my sister had this DSLR. We grew up with like film cameras, obviously. And that was fun. But when we were a little older, we got a DSLR, and it was mostly my sister's, but I'd steal it. And I always just did it as for fun and just enjoyed it. And then one day it just hit. I was like, why don't I buy one for myself? Like, why don't I turn this into something? So it was just kind of I called myself a closet photographer for a long time. Didn't really tell anyone what I was doing. Right. Just wanted to see if I could do it. And then eventually one day I was just like, I'm doing it. And so that's kind of where I am now.
So you were rebellious against your parents, saying, I don't want to be an artist, Dad. I'm going to become an artist instead.
Kind of. I mean, he didn't really care if I went to school for psychology. I have a degree in psychology, but he wasn't too excited when I said I was going to not use my very expensive degree from my old. But now he's super proud, so it's okay.
Well, that's awesome. Now, one thing I want to get into in this podcast right off the bat is I think for people like me who are in animation and don't know anything about photography, there's this interest in what kind of cameras people are using and the kinds of lenses. So you were talking about how even before you got a DSLR, which is a digital for those who don't know what that is, you were using film cameras before that, presumably. Do you remember what those were in that DSLR when you got it?
I mean, I was a kid. Those are old. They probably weren't even quality. I remember the first DSLR we had. No, mine were like cheap, like just
like a Minolta.
I don't even remember. It's been like 20 years. But the DSLR I had was like a Sony, and it was my sister's, and we didn't have any lenses for it. I just used the one that came. It was not best quality back then. It was like a really, in today's world of technology, it would be a joke. Back then it wasn't. Back then it was great. But now I wish I shot film. I love film. It's beautiful. Christian shoots film. A little jealous I don't, but I'm too cheap right now.
So wise.
It's too expensive. That, and I don't like to wait. My films to develop.
Well, especially when you have a business, right? You got deadlines to meet and stuff.
And there's some amazing film photographers that do weddings. I don't know how they do it. They're fabulous, but maybe one day. But that's a ways from now because I have mostly being a wedding photographer isn't just photographing. Like there's so much more to it, so it doesn't. But now I shoot with Nikon. I solely shoot with Nikon. Thank you, I know Christian likes
Yes. A little silent golf clap from Christian over there on the side.
I'm glad to know that she's on the right side of the fight. That's all. You hear that, Canon people?
I didn't know there was a fight.
We're creating a schism that didn't exist.
It did in my photography school.
That's fine.
People fought about Nikon versus Canon, and
a little disclaimer: I have no issue with Nikon, Canon. So Christian does.
Yeah.
Well, Sony is starting to kill it right now. I am very impressed with what they're coming out with.
Yeah, they are.
I mean, your first DSLR was a Sony.
It was.
Is it kind of nice to see Sony sort of now becoming the camera to get in the market? Any nostalgia there?
I mean, honestly, I'm pretty set with Nikon, not because Nikon. I mean, I do love it, but man, I can't start over. It's so expensive. There's so much money that goes into building your gear, which a lot of people don't realize. You get a camera and they're like, oh, you can take anything. Oh yeah, but they don't realize how much money goes into just that setup. So when people are like, oh yeah, it's just like you can do this for free, right? I'm like, it's expensive.
Yeah.
It's expensive.
Can you talk about that though? Like, what does that setup entail?
So for me, because I'm a wedding photographer, I automatically have 2 camera bodies on me at all times. I may not shoot with both of them, but I can't afford for something to go wrong on a wedding day. And most photographers hopefully have this for weddings, have the same setup as where they're shooting with 2 cameras, or they have a backup camera ready to go if something happens. Because you just never know. Cold weather, any kind of bad weather, something could happen, your camera could drop. That's happened to me before. So having that backup camera is really good. So I have 2 bodies, and then I have multiple lenses. I typically do prime lenses, which for those that don't know it, it's a lens that doesn't zoom in. It's not a zoom, it's a fixed lens. So I like those better because they tend to be a little sharper. But I do also have two zoom lenses, which I typically use on the wedding day because it's just, you don't have time to move. Sometimes you just have to zoom in. So my widest lens, so it can get the most in the image, would be my 24-70. So it means I can get like the most amount of space. No. I feel like you want to answer that.
Yeah. When she says 24-70, that's indicating that it's a zoom lens, not a fixed one. What that means is that you can open the lens by zooming out to 24 millimeters or Correct. Zoom in to 70 millimeters.
Correct. So yeah, 24 millimeter would be my widest. My widest and my like close up are my 2 zooms. So I have a 24-70 millimeter, and then I have a 70 millimeter to a 200. Those are both kind of like my all around. So a 200 means like if I'm shooting a wedding and I'm at the very back, I can zoom in pretty close and get a nice tight shot of the couple, a close up. And then if I'm doing 24, I'm usually able 24 millimeter. I'm able to get a wide view of the ceremony site. But I kind of vary. It depends on the situation. Ideally, I'd be shooting with my 50 or my 85 millimeter lens, but it really just varies on situations. And a wedding photographer has to be able to hop between knowing what they need before they need it, so they're prepared for the right circumstance.
Right.
So when you're talking about having 2 bodies with you on a shoot, do you typically have one as your zoom and one as your prime?
Honestly, it varies. If it's a family shoot, it's usually just one camera, and then maybe I'll leave the backup in the car just in case, heaven forbid something happen. But if it's a wedding, I usually carry. People make fun of me, but it's great. It's like a holster. It's called the spider holster, which I should totally get, be their spokesperson. I love it. It's basically...
Yeah.
Spider holster. A wonderful tool for every photographer.
It is. So it's a belt. It's a really, geeky belt, and I straight up have a fanny pack for my memory cards. But it basically allows me to hold the cameras at my hips. And it allows not the back strain that I used to get, which sounds like I'm old. I'm not that old. But, you know, it's real. So it allows for me to be able to carry both cameras at once at weddings. And that allows, usually it is a zoom and a fixed lens, just so I have the option. But I tend to gravitate towards the fixed lens more so, but I have to be prepared. My gear, there's more that entails, but probably not that many people are interested in all my flashes and my lighting setup.
No, I want to hear it.
I'm sure there are people that would be.
There probably is. I mean, the flashes are kind of a pain in the butt, but you have to use them in weddings. Like, there's just always horrible lighting situations you have to be able to master. I'm not a master of it. I'm still growing. That would probably be the one area I still need to grow in, like, the most. But I was doing in, like, studio portraiture for a little while, have the lights set up, but I found myself not loving it. Like, I don't love a white backdrop. Some people really do have friends that would prefer it. Christian prefers it. You can get really creative, but for me, like, it's not my passion. Like, I love families and couples, and especially love couples that are in love, so I like to photograph that. And while you can capture that in a studio, I just like to use the natural elements outside.
Okay, so then that's usually natural lighting, or is that also the flash and the other lighting?
Mostly natural lighting. I would consider myself like a natural light photographer. But though I'm able to capture, you know, dark ceremonies or dark receptions. It's just I have to be able to, so I have to do it all. But if I had to choose, it'd be perfect lighting and outdoors, whether it be the beach, which is what I also specialize in, or like a nice green area.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, when you're shooting indoors, obviously it's a whole different ballgame than when you're shooting outside. In fact, do you use different equipment knowing that you're going into an indoor wedding?
Yes and no. Yeah, I mean, I always have the same equipment with me at a wedding because I always have more than I need, but every situation requires something different.
Mm-hmm. Because we were talking about using zoom versus prime. I know that a prime lens typically can open the aperture wider. Would you use that, or would you be wary of having too shallow a depth of field?
I like to open it up a little wider because it allows that. And for those of you that don't know what depth of field is, I like the fact that it can kind of blur out the background. Even though we love the backgrounds typically we're shooting in, it just kind of creates this romantic, creamy vibe that I personally love. But it really depends on situations. There's certain weddings, if it's outdoor and harsh light, I can't necessarily shoot that way because I don't want to allow so much light to where I can't see their skin texture, which oftentimes harsh light can blow that out. Or if it's a dark ceremony inside of a church, usually sometimes I'll mix it up with, some churches don't allow flash to be used, which makes it really difficult, so you end up with some darker, grainier images. I used to hate that, but now I've just learned to just say I do with what I have.
Yeah.
And so I like it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I mean, here's a question. You've been shooting for long enough now that I think you could answer this pretty easily. For someone who's interested in shooting what you shoot, what would you say a good basic setup would be? What would be the essentials?
The essentials? So to shoot like a wedding or just to photograph people in general?
Let's say shoot a wedding.
Shoot a wedding. So I would say there's more essentials in a wedding to do it right, just because that's a big day. I mean, when I started shooting weddings, I wasn't charging much because you really can't, because you don't have the knowledge, but at least one good quality camera body, a flash. I highly recommend a 50mm lens if that's the only lens you can have, because it's a good all-around lens, although you kind of need, some photographers say you just need one or two lenses and you're good to go, which can be true, but I've learned I like to keep my equipment well-rounded so I'm able to capture any scenario I need to capture. So I would say a DSLR, a 50mm, and a flash would be like the bare minimum you need to capture a wedding, but I would highly recommend not doing it until you have a little bit more gear.
So you're kind of getting into you as the business. So I kind of want to take it back really quick. So you started out with you kind of learning from your sister, doing it with your sister, and then you kind of moving on to saying to your dad, hey, I'm going to do this instead of my degree. Is that kind of when the business started for you, or when did that come in, or how was that transition?
So I stole my sister's camera a lot when I was before I'd gotten into college, and I think we both were just having fun with it. We didn't really know what we were doing. We were basically taking photos of the dog, which was great. But it wasn't until after college that I got my degree in psychology, and I loved it. I thought I was going to be a marriage and family counselor. And I realized I don't like my set hours. Like, I want to be able to have a flexible schedule. And I love helping people, and I love being around people. But I didn't really see myself in an office. I don't even sit in an office much now. Like, I can't sit still for too long. So I just decided to just take it in as a hobby, start playing around with it, photographing whoever would let me. My poor husband got a lot of photographs taken. The dogs, whoever.
Here's to the significant others and loved ones of photographers. You guys are the true heroes.
Yeah, he's probably sick of it now, but he does pretty good. But yeah, so I just eventually was like, I'm just going to photograph anything that moves. I'm just going to go to the beach. I'm going to go anywhere. And it just one day it just hit me. I feel like, I mean, I can't pinpoint the exact moment where I was like, this is going to become a business. So I think any business you started out, you don't really think of the logistics. You're just like, I want to do this. And in the art world, you really fall in love with doing the art, and you really hate the business side.
Yeah.
You really hate it. And there's days where I'm just so over the business side of it, because it's hard. We want to do our art, and we want to create something for people, and we really pour our soul into it. But then there's this other side of it that's kind of like takes up the majority of the time. So for the longest time, it was just fun. And then somebody paid me once, and then a friend of mine asked me to shoot her wedding, and it was the first wedding I'd ever shot. And I was like, you know this, right? And she goes, yeah. And I shot it, and I just fell in love. Like, I just loved watching. I loved being a bridesmaid because you got to be a special part of the day. Now I don't want to be a bridesmaid. I love photographing weddings because you get to be a part of the wedding day. So, like, that's unforgettable, really. You just don't forget about those beautiful photos that are hanging on your wall for years. That your kids are going to look at, 50 years from now and go, oh, that's what mom and dad looked like on their wedding day. That's how happy they were, or still are, hopefully.
Yeah, and that's interesting that you're touching on kind of like the way you think about the photographs, your subjects. Do you think that it was a logical step to go from psychology to photography, at least the style of photography that you're doing, still being interested in people, still being interested in helping people in that situation of family or perhaps the creation of family?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really think of it at the time, because when I got my degree, I had a very set path in my mind, which I think we all do when we start something. And the more I kind of pulled away from it, the more I pulled towards photography, I started realizing, okay, my very expensive bio degree is now, I'm still using it, just not, I mean, there's only so much you can do with a bachelor's in psychology, because it's a bachelor's, but I feel like I don't regret it at all. There was so much that I used from that, so I'm sure that it's benefited me in ways that I don't even know about.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think like what Christian was saying when you were talking about just like, family care, but also how much you are involved in their lives, because it is a super special moment and it's super tender. And so I think that's cool that like you connected those things and found what's working most for you. Now I kind of want to transition from that. So you've done weddings mostly, but you also have lifestyle and dogs and other things like that. So in terms of equipment first, does that differ? I
still use the same equipment. If I'm shooting a family portrait session, I usually bring 3 lenses with me. 2 of them are primes, a 50 and an 85. And typically I'll bring my zoom lens, which is a 24-70. That's not my ideal lens, but it does create beautiful images. And the reason I bring that lens is for young kids. I don't specialize in like young kids, even though I love them. I like all the family sessions I've photographed over the years, I loved. But kids are like dogs in a sense, photographing wise. They move very fast. And with dogs, I can have them sit and stay for a treat, whereas kids are a little bit smarter and they're like, no.
But they don't want dog treats anymore?
No. I mean, it's not like when we were kids. We ate dog treats. Yeah. But, so yeah, my gear still stays the same. I don't bring quite as much because I can't usually just leave it on the beach or leave it in the park. So I do carry a little lighter.
When it comes to wedding versus like a lifestyle, are they contacting you the same way? Is it kind of the same process, or is it different depending on what they want?
Yeah, it's a little different. I mean, people will contact me. Most of my referrals come from friends or family or people finding me on Instagram, believe it or not. Like, everybody hates Instagram. I love it. But yeah, so a lot of people follow me because of Instagram or referrals from other clients. And so they usually just contact me. If it's a wedding, there's a lot more that goes into it. We either meet for coffee or wine or something just to kind of get to know each other, because that's a bigger deal than a family session, because I'm going to be there for so many intimate moments. I always tell my clients, I'm like, hey, if we leave this meeting and you felt uncomfortable with me, we can say our goodbyes here, because even though I really want to still photograph their wedding, if they feel uncomfortable, it's not beneficial to them for me to be there. But if it's like a family session, it's a little more simpler. Like, have they seen my work? If they've seen it and they like the style that I do, then we book them. We pick a date and we book them, because it's not, it's a family session, which I still value as much as I value weddings, but there's not as much on the line. If we don't click for an hour, we make it work, but a wedding day is just a little bit more high stress.
Yeah.
And I think what you're touching on right there is where you and I have differed as photographers. Is I love the idea of being able to set something up perfectly and getting it exactly the way I want in a studio, where you're more interested in grabbing genuine moments as they're happening. Yeah.
I mean, I do still like to set people up, and I still like to encourage them and kind of give them, I still like to envision ahead of time and kind of put them in place. I wouldn't consider myself a photographer that poses my clients a lot, but I have clients all over the spectrum. Some need the posing. They need to feel like I'm in control and I'm taking care of it for them. And some, they just want to pretend I'm not there. And that's great too. I like both clients the same.
Yeah.
I like them both the same. It's as long as they all like each other and they're in love, we're good to go.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So to follow up with me just making that comment, if you're in the shoes of someone who's maybe considering doing photography, what kinds of stuff would you say indicate, hey, maybe you're interested in doing this? Is it when they're shooting family events? Is it when they're shooting pets? Like, what would you say, like, hey, if you're interested in these things and these are things you're doing, maybe consider that you're interested in shooting the style of photography that I do?
Okay, that's a good question. I think you kind of have to find where your niche is. Like, for me, I kind of did a little bit of everything. I did in studio, which was kind of my garage, and it wasn't that pretty, but it worked. And then I've kind of done a little bit of everything, and you just kind of find, as I was editing the photos, I kind of had to ask myself, is this the type of work I want to continue to do? Is this how I want to promote myself? Because in photography, you can be kind of in everything, but it's really important you kind of have a specialty, because if you don't have a specialty, you're just attracting a bunch of random stuff, but you're not attracting your ideal type of work, which is fine. But for me, my ideal type of work is wedding and portraits and family portraits, and that's mostly in natural light. So for me, I have to mostly post that and mostly immerse myself in that. So I think someone starting out, I would say, shoot everything. And what makes you the happiest? Where do you find yourself finding the most joy in the work that you're doing? If it's in studio like you, then that's great. And if it's outdoors like me, that's perfect. Then you kind of have an idea. But I don't think it comes easily. I think you kind of just have to dabble in everything.
And that comment right there, I think, is a huge thing about photography, at least for me, and I want to ask your opinion on this. I feel like a lot of photography is challenging yourself, questioning yourself, and almost, in a sense, very philosophical. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but really, like, I want to hear from you, why photography? Why not video? Why not something else? I know you mentioned, I couldn't paint or I couldn't do this, but what drew you specifically to photography as a medium of art?
That's a good question. I don't really think it's necessarily in the terms of why this and not that. It was more so I had a camera as a kid and I loved doing it, and I realized the other avenues I had tried, someone was always better than me, which in the case, someone's always better than me now too. But no one in my circle at the time was immersing themselves in it. And not that there's a ton of photographers now. There were everywhere. So it's not like I'm doing anything super unique. But I didn't want to be like the copycat. Like, my sister's a painter, so I'm going to paint. or my mom can sew and craft. I'm going to do that. Like, I enjoyed it, and I respect all those art forms, but I didn't find the joy in it as much, and as much as I did, like, photographing things happening. So probably never picked up videography because I can tend to have a shaky hand because I drink a lot of coffee. So as you can imagine, my videos would be real bad. So don't ask me to do that.
And kind of piggybacking off of that, and you were kind of finding, what worked for you, the art form that you enjoyed. What pushed you into maybe if there's like, a couple of things that maybe really pushed you from like, okay, amateur to like moving into professional? Was that just you experimenting and trying everything and finding what you really enjoyed, or was that technical things that you learned later just through practice? What might some of those be?
So I once heard someone tell me that a professional is someone who gets paid to do what they're doing. And so the first time I got paid to do a photo shoot, I was like, oh, I'm a professional. And I honestly felt it. And at the time, yeah, I mean, from a very, like, far back standpoint, yeah, I got paid to do something. I'm a professional. But I think what got me to the area that I'm at now, like now I go into a wedding, I feel a lot more confident. I think it would probably be just in this last year where I would say I'm not really afraid to take any wedding now, because before it was just like, oh man, what am I going to do? Like, how am I going to work this? Now I fully understand, okay, where's the light coming from? Okay, how do I get this couple who maybe is awkward in front of camera because they're just not used to it? How do I get them comfortable? And I think that's what really made me more from amateur to professional, is now I can go into it and I can act professionally. Even though I'd like to say after I got my first photo shoot, I was a professional and it felt so good. Yeah, now I would say I can consider myself now a professional. I don't remember how many hours they say in any avenue. Like, there's a ridiculous amount of hours you have to spend doing something in order to, like, say you've mastered it. Mm-hmm. We could Google it later, but or you guys can. I don't care.
Yeah,
but
I'll just dub over me being like, "It's this many hours." I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Insert here.
Yeah, I think it's 10,000 hours.
I think you're right. So 10,000 hours you have to spend doing the same thing in order to be, professional at it. And I think for me, I haven't counted the amount of hours I've spent shooting or editing, but I feel like it's just the experience. So. But me in 5 years from now, I might go, oh, that Holly was dumb. So,
I think everybody does that.
That's me in 5 years. Yeah. Honestly, I wish I would have learned more about lighting before I started shooting. And I think that a lot of photographers, we start and we just kind of shoot anything. And that'd be my advice, is when you're just starting, shoot everything and just see how it looks, because that's how you learn. But for photographers and for me now, I think for me, my kind of trade secrets was just honestly spending the time to do the hard work. For me, photographing everything, seeing where the light's coming from, seeing how it looks on the image after I shoot it, seeing how it all comes together, it makes a big difference, because now I go into my shoots and I know what I'm doing. So my clients automatically feel comfortable. Even though I don't tell them, hey, I don't know what I'm doing right now. They can feel it, because they're like, oh, she's taking a while to take the shot. She's taking a while to get there. Whereas now is like, I know exactly what I need to do. So now my focus is on my couples, versus before it was, how do I get the setting right? What am I looking for? So I think one of the trade secrets isn't really a secret. It's more so
practice.
Practice. Figure out what it is that you're going for, because once you know that, it will work.
That's awesome.
I'll learn by doing philosophy.
Yeah, basically.
That's awesome. Jumping back over to something you were talking about earlier with different styles. We were talking about wedding photography. You had mentioned styles. Mm-hmm. So developing your own style, how would you describe it? And then how would it differ from maybe other wedding photographers' styles?
Oh, that's a good question too. I knew you were going to ask this too, and I still don't have the right answer for you. My style is ever evolving. I started out and it was just like, I don't know what I was doing. And as I feel like just in this last year, I've really honed in on what I want it to look like. So if you look at my Instagram feed, you'll see a very, hopefully cohesive. I hope it is. If it's not, tell me.
Definitely it is, yeah.
So a cohesive, just kind of coloring. But somebody asked me how I describe my style recently, and I would say clean. I want to say bright. I wouldn't say it's like super light and airy, which a lot of photographers would describe styles as either light and airy or like dark and moody. I'm definitely not dark and moody. While I respect that kind of style, I don't think I could see it on my wall. Like, I just don't see that. I need stuff that's colorful and light. But I would just describe it as clean, I guess. Like, I feel like it needs some more adjectives, but clean is the one that's been sticking with me for a long time.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you were talking about lighting earlier too, and how that really changed the way you look at it, because that's the first thing I noticed when I was looking through your Instagram feed just today, was looking at how light plays into all your photos, and like you were saying, with the similar color scheme.
If you go into my Instagram and you keep kind of going down, because my website's always kind of being revamped, because I want my clients that are looking to hire me, I want them to see who I am now, not who I was years ago.
Right.
So if you scroll down all the way to the bottom, you'll see a definite style change. And I thought about deleting all those because I'm like, nobody needs to see this. Mm-hmm. But I want people to see the difference in how I grew and how I changed. And maybe in 5 years from now, or a year from now, or 2 days from now, things might change. I hope not 2 days. Yeah. But my idea is that it's nice and it's cohesive, and now people can say, wow, like, she really knows what she's doing now, versus, you know, a few years ago, it's like, kind of colors are a little all over the map. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't have hired me back then.
Well, that's awesome. No, I would totally agree. When I was looking again at your work today, super cohesive style, super appealing, very tight, very modern. And that actually what makes me transition into is your love of dogs and dog photography. Like, when did that get started?
Oh man, I've always loved dogs.
Which is funny because, correct me if I'm wrong, you're allergic to them?
I'm super allergic to them. It's fine. We have a lot of air purifiers. We just bought another one. It's fine.
You have 2 massive dogs.
I have 2 pit bulls. I'm a big advocate for pit bulls. Which is really weird because a lot of people meet me and they're like, you're a short blonde girl. What are you doing with these muscular dogs? And then they meet my husband and they see long hair and tattoos and they're like, who are you guys?
Yeah.
Like, what's going on? And then they find out we're Christians and they're like,
wow. And you went into art? What is wrong with you?
Yeah,
I'm
like,
just kidding.
we're just like this confusing like couple, which is what we, you know, it's fine. But I grew up having pit bulls. Like, I don't have a memory without having a dog. My first dog, I was there before I was born, and I just remember as a kid sitting on her, pulling her ears. She was a pitty, and I loved her. And I've always had pit bulls since. My family had a Italian Greyhound once, and I loved him too because I love all dogs. But he was kind of a little jerk. So.
Oh really?
He liked me, but he didn't like my sister. Like, he would straight up just, he would go and like pee on her bed and run out. Oh, it was great.
It's a hit and run. Oh my gosh.
You stole her camera.
And her dog.
It's technically my mom's dog, so it was fine.
Okay.
Yeah, she didn't really like him.
So you were photographing your own dogs, and that's how that got started, or how did that happen?
I want to say yes because I love dogs so much, but I don't really know. I think I just fell in love with just taking images and just seeing what would happen. Like, it was just fun. I think I just started off thinking it was just fun. I wish I had a more fun story for you guys.
No,
that's
great.
I think
that's kind of lame.
Well, I would say that's actually more common than you realize. I think a lot of people fall in love with the joy of really just looking through a lens. Seeing the world through the eye of a lens is a fascinating and wonderful experience.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of photographers get into it just by having that experience, peering at the world through a controlled, different perspective.
True. And I would say photographing dogs does make you a better photographer, because those guys move and they don't sit still and they shake their, like, they're crazy and they'll try to lick your lens. It's quite entertaining, but I still photograph my dogs all the time. I should do it more often because I love them. But, they don't love it as much as I love it. So.
Well, you also volunteer to take photos of dogs, correct?
I did. I wouldn't say that I still do. I mean, I'm still open to it. I worked with the Orange County Pit Bull Rescue, photographing their adoptable dogs. I haven't done it in a while. Life got kind of busy, so my availability wasn't as open as it used to be. But that did challenge me, and it was hard. hard because you would see these cute little dogs that need a home, and I'd look at Grant, my husband, and go, oh man, can I take this one home? And we already had 2, so we couldn't, but it was so rewarding. But it's probably best that I took a little step back from that because, like Christian mentioned, I am allergic to dogs. It wasn't always that way, but I'm a true dog lover. I don't care. I wake up with red eyes, and if I sneeze, people are, are you sick? I'm like, no, just have dogs. It's fine. It's cool.
That's true devotion right there.
Yeah, thanks.
I know you kind of talked about this is just transitioning so we can, get you something to eat before your meeting. So thanks for meeting with us before you have something else you need to do.
Well, thanks. That makes me sound really important.
Meeting upon meeting.
Yeah. We talked about your advice to people getting into photography. Yeah. What about for starting your own business?
Gosh, I need advice for that.
I think everybody needs for that.
It's so hard. Being your business owner is not easy because you get into it, like I said, and you think this is great. I work from home. It's really a lot of self-discipline, which I'm learning that I suck at. I'm kind of a big time waster, even though I try not to be. But I think my biggest advice for people starting a business is know your end goal, know what you're looking to do, and make a schedule. Like a lot of people know that I work when I work, my hours are so randomized, and when I'm working, a lot of times I'm working from home, and for the longest time I thought, I can go grab coffee or I can go on this beach walk because I'm working from home. Oftentimes it comes to bite you in the butt more than you think because that hour or 2 hours you spent, which was great, but you come home and you still have work to do and you still have a business to run, and you either lose sleep or you just have to prioritize. Mm-hmm. So I think starting a business I need more advice, but at the same time, if I were to give it, try to schedule it out, try to prioritize, try to have set goals that you need to meet, and learn to say no. I've had to say no a lot this year, and I feel guilty, but it's probably for the best. Probably for the best.
And I think that's part of being a professional, right? Is even having to say no. Because you're at that place, you know what you do and what you can handle, and you just have to say no.
Yeah. I'm very much an introvert. I love being at home, but I also because I'm at home so much, I like to get out and go grab coffee or spend time with people, but I kind of feel like a jerk being like, no, I don't have time for that. But at the same time, it's like, I have to prioritize the business in order for it to grow, in order for it to provide for the family, versus, while going out and getting coffee is fun, it doesn't provide.
Yeah. So you would say big advice for anyone interested in making a business out of really any art field: time management and saying no to the fun stuff.
Still have fun, because you need it. You definitely go crazy sitting at home at a computer or creating art. Even though it's wonderful, you need a different outlet too. But yeah, saying no and time management. And if anybody has time management advice, send it my way.
Well, what you do have, though, is amazing work. And so what I want people to be able to do now is, where can they check out your work? Like website, Instagram, all that. Yeah,
so you can find me at Instagram at Holly Sigafoos Photo, or my website is just hollysigafoos.com. That is a hard one to figure out, but you can find me there.
Oh, that's awesome. Very cool. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to hang out with us, talk about your art. And before we end, I do have one more question.
Gosh, I knew this was coming.
Why don't you tell us about the time you met Fabio?
Oh gosh, I knew this was coming. And I literally tried to figure out how I could get out of this. But then I just sounded like a jerk every time.
Hey, sometimes you need to learn how to say no.
That is true.
Oh! I still want to hear it, though.
I've already told you.
I want to hear it again.
Heard it.
All right, fine. I will give you the snippet. So when I was a kid, we grew up in the high desert where you ride motorcycles. That's just what you do. I still, to this day, have never been surfing, and I live in a beach town. I don't care. So I grew up around motorcycles, and my dad had this friend where we bought the motorcycles from. We called him Uncle Dave. He was a friend of ours, but we basically just hung out at his motorcycle shop. And so he sold motorcycles to Fabio. And I was probably 12 or 14 at the time. And so my dad had helped Fabio move from different houses in LA, and he had a lot of motorcycles, so he needed help. So Dad and my Uncle Dave had helped him move, and so he wanted to thank them by taking them to dinner, including the families. So we drove up to LA, and at the time I hadn't really been to LA much ever as a kid because we lived in a dirt bubble. And for those of you
like
that are...
Pigpen.
Yeah, because we're used to the high desert, you know. But yeah, so we went to dinner with him and his parents. And it was so long ago that I don't really remember much, but I remember he had cool dogs and a really cool house, and he was pretty nice. Wow. I mean, he had a lot of roots. He had some hair growth that, for a star, could have been fixed, but that's how I met Fabio. And,
very nice.
See,
haven't seen him since.
Aren't you glad you told us that? I feel better, don't you, Christian?
I feel great.
I feel indifferent. This brings no joy to me at all.
Oh, that's why I knew I had to ask it. No, but seriously, thanks again for coming on the podcast. It's been awesome. Always good to hang out with you and your husband, Grant. Both awesome people. So thanks again.
You're welcome.
Until next time, keep doing it.
Doing what?